He used it to pollute our economy with $7 million of fraud. The judge looked over his spectacles at Albert. Mr. Talton, I see your history. Electrical engineering, resourcefulness, a mind that can take apart a Bose speaker and put it back together better than the factory. And yet, here you are, again. Why? Albert didn't have a lecture this time. He just looked at the judge. I didn't want a 9 to 5. Your Honor, I wanted to be the factory. The factory is closed, the judge said. The sentence was 9 years. For a financial crime, it was a hammer blow. It was a reflection of the scale, the arrogance, and the H2, H3A trail that had crossed 50 states and 9 countries. As Albert was let out, he caught Allison's eye. She looked like she was seeing a stranger. He hadn't just faked the money, he had faked the life. Chapter 11, The Ghost of Englewood. Federal prison is a place where time is the only currency that isn't counterfeit. Albert Talton sat in the yard, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He was 44 now. By the time he got out, he'd be in his 50s. The Aston Martin would be a classic. The H2, H3-8 notes would be a legend in the specimen vault, a ghost story told to new recruits. David Goldberg, calling from a prison phone, told a reporter, hopefully this time he's done doing dirt. He has the intellect to prosper. I hope he does. But Albert wasn't thinking about prospering. He was thinking about the next generation of printers. He was thinking about the new security features on the upcoming $100 bill, the 3D blue ribbon, the bell and the inkwell. To the world, he was a cautionary tale. To the Secret Service, he was a solved case. But in the quiet of his cell, Albert Talton closed his eyes and could still hear the rhythmic hum of an inkjet printer. He could still smell the sweet, chemical scent of hairspray. He was a Ferrari engine in a cage, and the cage was only temporary. The world was still full of machines, and Albert Talton still knew how to see right through them. The end. The Alchemy of Green, based on the story of Albert Talton. Prologue, The Weight of the Bark. The air in Lawndale, California, always smelled of salt from the Pacific and the faint, acrid tang of exhaust from the 405. But inside the townhouse on the morning of May 8, 2008, the air smelled of something else entirely. It smelled of wet ink, cheap hairspray, and the desperate, electric hum of 12 inkjet printers working in unison. Albert Talton stood in the center of his garage, his hands stained a permanent, faint shade of charcoal. He didn't mind. To him, those stains were the mark of a master. He watched the trays of the printers slide back and forth with rhythmic precision. Each pass of the print head was a stroke of genius, a defiant middle finger to the United States Treasury. He picked up a freshly printed sheet of recycled newsprint. It felt thin, almost fragile, until he glued it to its counterpart. He held it up to the light of a single desk lamp. The watermark, the ghostly face of Benjamin Franklin, stared back at him. It wasn't perfect. If you looked closely, Ben looked a little more like a caricature from a boardwalk artist than a founding father. But Albert knew a secret that the Secret Service seemed to forget. People don't look closely. They look for the color. They look for the feel. And they trust the pen. He reached for a can of Aquanet hairspray. White Rain is for amateurs, he thought, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. He coated the bill with a fine mist. The chemical reaction would fool the iodine in the counterfeit detection pens, turning the telltale black mark into a reassuring amber. Suddenly, the rhythmic humming of his empire was shattered. Boom! The front door didn't just open, it disintegrated. The sound of heavy boots on hardwood floor echoed through the narrow hallway like thunder. Secret Service! Get down! Hands in the air! Albert didn't run. He didn't reach for a weapon. He simply stood there, watching the ink dry on $1 million of worthless paper. He felt a strange sense of relief, followed by an even stronger surge of pride. He had done it. He had beaten the system for 2 years with a $200 printer and a dream. As Special Agent Matthew Mayo rounded the corner, his sidearm leveled at Albert's chest, Albert slowly raised his ink-stained hands. "I was wondering when you'd show up," Albert said, his voice remarkably calm. "You're late." Chapter 1, The Boy from Englewood. To understand the man Albert Talden became, one had to understand the streets that raised him. Englewood in the late 70s and early 80s was a place where the American dream didn't live in white picket fenced yards. It lived in the hustle. Young Albert was never a joiner. While the neighborhood boys were pledging their lives to the Crips or the Bloods, Albert was in his bedroom taking apart a transistor radio. He wasn't interested in the violence of the streets, but he was fascinated by its mechanics. He saw the drug dealers with their gold chains and their shiny Cadillacs. And he didn't see thugs. He saw entrepreneurs who had figured out a way to bypass the 9-to-5 grind that had turned his father's hands into calloused, tired tools. Why work for the man? Al, his friend Paul McCory would ask, as they sat on the porch watching the world go by. The man don't even know your name. I don't want the man to know my name, Albert would reply, his eyes tracking the intricate wiring of a Bose speaker he'd found at a swap meet. I want the man to wonder who's taking his seat. Albert was a natural engineer. He had the kind of brain that saw the world in blueprints. When he finally got his hands on a Bose stereo system, he didn't just listen to the bass, he dismantled the housing. He studied the air displacement, the coil tension, the way the sound waves bounced off the interior plastic. Within a week, he had built a replica from scratch using scrap parts. It sounded better than the original. That was the Talden touch. He didn't just copy, he improved. He tried the straight path. He really did. He enrolled in electrical engineering courses after high school. He sat in the lecture halls, listening to professors drone on about Ohm's law and circuit breakers. But the pace was too slow. He looked at the job listings for junior engineers and saw the starting salaries. $40,000 a year, he thought. I could spend $40,000 in a weekend if I lived the way I wanted to. The dirt started small. A forged check here. A bit of bank fraud there. It was easy. It was a game. But the problem with games played against the government is that the